Australia today, often perceived as a bastion of modern secularism, harbors a profound religious history. Beneath its bustling cities and vast ancient landscapes lies a narrative deeply shaped by Protestant Christianity over nearly 2.5 centuries. Churches, schools, and moral traditions didn't just emerge, they grew intrinsically alongside the colony itself, fundamentally intertwined with Australia's development. This journey invites us to explore a pivotal question. How did Protestantism become one of the most influential forces in Australia's early history, and why did it manifest in such distinct forms? When Britain initiated the colonization of Australia in 1788, it was far more than a mere political or economic venture. The arrival of the First Fleet brought an entire cultural paradigm. British laws, the English language, and, crucially, the Protestant faith as an inseparable component of British identity. This was not simply a spiritual offering, but a comprehensive worldview. Anglicanism, as the established church of the empire, arrived with official sanction and state support. Its chaplains were integral to the early colonial administration, tasked with both spiritual guidance and moral policing. Methodism soon followed, emphasizing personal conversion, fervent evangelism, and a powerful drive for social reform, appealing to the working classes and those seeking spiritual renewal. Presbyterianism, brought by Scottish immigrants, underscored intellectual discipline, theological precision, and a profound commitment to education. Other Protestant traditions, including Baptists and Congregationalists, also crossed the seas, each establishing distinct communities and building foundational institutions. This raises a critical analytical question. Why did Protestant Christianity specifically take root so rapidly and profoundly in this new, challenging land? And how did it so thoroughly shape Australian society as the colony matured into a nation? 18th and 19th century Britain was overwhelmingly Protestant, its national identity and cultural fabric deeply interwoven with its religious convictions. The Church of England held official legal status, its influence permeating every aspect of public life. Simultaneously, other Protestant groups, Methodists, Baptists, Congregationalists, were experiencing rapid expansion through powerful evangelical revival movements and extensive missionary work. The Protestant principle, often encapsulated by Romans 1:17, "The just shall live by faith," emphasized personal faith and individual conscience over institutional ritual. When British settlers arrived in Australia, these Protestant beliefs were not merely Sunday practices, they became foundational to daily colonial life. This extended from mandatory Sunday worship and strict Sabbatarianism to pervasive moral expectations concerning work, family, and public conduct. We must honestly ask, was Protestantism in Australia primarily a spiritual guide, offering meaning and fostering moral communities in a harsh, new environment? Or was it more of a cultural inheritance, something British people brought simply because it was an intrinsic part of being British, often irrespective of deep personal religious conviction? The answer likely varied dramatically among individuals and communities. Understanding this nuanced distinction is crucial for a comprehensive analysis of Australian religious history. Australia never developed a singular monolithic Protestant identity, unlike some other nations. Instead, it became a vibrant mosaic of multiple Protestant denominations, each with distinct theological emphases and diverse constituencies. Anglicans, for instance, stressed tradition, liturgical worship, and a hierarchical structure, maintaining a close affinity to Catholic practices while firmly remaining Protestant. Their presence often symbolized continuity with the British establishment. Methodists, conversely, focused intensely on personal faith experiences, emotional conversion, and active social reform efforts, particularly among the working classes. Their circuit riders and camp meetings brought religion to remote areas. Presbyterians, with their Scottish heritage, championed intellectual discipline, theological precision, and, notably, education, founding some of Australia's most prestigious schools and universities. Together, these diverse Protestant groups constructed churches across the continent, established educational institutions, and operated numerous charitable organizations serving the poor and vulnerable. This denominational pluralism presents a compelling analytical question. Did having multiple Protestant traditions genuinely strengthen Christian faith in Australia by offering varied approaches that appeal to different people, thereby keeping religion vital and dynamic? Or did it conversely fragment Protestant influence by dividing Christians into competing groups that sometimes expended more energy on theological disputes than on cooperating for shared societal goals? Historical evidence suggests both effects were simultaneously at play, depending on the specific context and community. Protestant churches exerted immense influence on Australia's nascent education systems, shaping expectations for work ethic and establishing standards for community behavior. The Protestant work ethic, rooted in principles like Colossians 3:23, "Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord," posited that diligent labor glorified God and that idleness was sinful. This ethos became a cornerstone of colonial economic and social life. Protestant values such as personal discipline, sobriety with strong temperance movements, and individual responsibility for one's actions profoundly shaped colonial society's moral expectations. These were not merely religious ideals preached on Sundays. They rapidly evolved into pervasive social norms that everyone was expected to adhere to, regardless of their personal religious convictions. This created a powerful, if sometimes rigid, moral framework for the developing nation. Yet, we must critically ask, did this moral guidance genuinely foster stability and aid in building a functioning society under challenging colonial circumstances? Did Protestant ethics provide essential frameworks for community life and social cohesion? Or did it primarily generate social pressure and conformity, leading to the exclusion, judgment, or punishment of those who did not align with Protestant moral standards? Both outcomes likely occurred depending on the specific community and historical period. The very same moral framework that provided structure and support for some could, and often did, oppress others, highlighting the complex and often contradictory nature of religious influence. As Australia expanded throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, Protestant churches increasingly encountered and had to interact with other religious traditions and cultures. Large numbers of Irish Catholics arrived, often facing significant discrimination and prejudice from the dominant Protestant establishment. This sectarian divide became a defining feature of Australian social and political life for decades, manifesting in education, employment, and even sport. Indigenous spiritual traditions, deeply rooted in the land for millennia, persisted despite concerted missionary efforts to suppress them and convert Aboriginal peoples. Later waves of immigration brought Jewish communities, Orthodox Christians, and eventually Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus, and others, further diversifying Australia's religious landscape. These encounters sometimes led to genuine cooperation and mutual respect, with different faith communities collaborating on shared social problems. However, other times, serious tension and division emerged, as Protestant churches often sought to defend their perceived cultural dominance and traditional privileges. The crucial analytical question remains: how did Protestant dominance in Australia's early history impact religious freedom and inclusion for those outside its tradition? Did Protestant hegemony, by establishing principles of individual conscience and religious liberty, albeit often within a Protestant framework, ultimately make Australia more tolerant? Or did it conversely make Australia less inclusive by establishing Protestant Christianity as the normative standard against which all others were measured and often marginalized? The answer is complex and depends heavily on which specific groups and time periods are examined. This historical dynamic is vital for understanding Australia's contemporary religious diversity and the ongoing challenges of pluralism. By the mid-20th century, particularly accelerating after World War II, Australian society began to undergo fundamental transformations. Rapid urbanization concentrated populations in cities, shifting social dynamics away from traditional rural church structures. Multiculturalism, driven by immigration from non-British countries, profoundly diversified the population, introducing a myriad of new cultural and religious perspectives. Concurrently, secular thinking and skepticism toward religious authority grew, especially among younger generations, challenging established religious norms. In response to these profound changes, some Protestant churches experienced significant decline, marked by shrinking membership, the closure of congregations, and a reduction in their overt social influence. However, other Protestant churches actively adapted, demonstrating remarkable resilience. They engaged in innovative community outreach programs, took leading roles in social justice advocacy on issues like poverty and refugee rights, and updated their worship styles to appeal to modern sensibilities. Isaiah 43:19, "Behold, I am doing a new thing," became a guiding scripture for some adapting churches, justifying innovation and change. This compels us to ask, is Protestant Christianity in Australia genuinely fading away, becoming increasingly irrelevant as Australia secularizes? Or is it transforming into new, less visible forms that, while different from historical Protestantism, maintain core beliefs and continue to influence society in subtle yet significant ways? Measuring religious influence solely by traditional metrics like church attendance might overlook important cultural impacts and evolving forms of spiritual engagement. Today, Protestant churches, though no longer holding the same cultural hegemony, remain a significant part of Australia's foundational heritage. Their influence is still clearly discernible in multiple sectors, even as fewer Australians attend regular services or identify as Protestant. Education, for instance, continues to bear their mark, with many prestigious schools having deep Protestant origins and values. Charitable work sees churches running major social service organizations, providing essential support to vulnerable communities. Furthermore, Protestant perspectives continue to be voiced in ethical debates on critical issues such as poverty, immigration, and social justice, contributing to the national discourse. Protestant Christianity undeniably shaped Australian values around fairness, community, and individual responsibility in ways that persist, often unconsciously, even among non-religious Australians. The historical imprint is indelible. Yet, the key analytical question for modern Australia persists. What role does Protestant faith truly play in a largely secular society, where regular church attendance is no longer the norm for the majority? Is it primarily a historical legacy, something that profoundly shaped the past but now exerts limited ongoing influence? Or does it continue to provide meaningful community, moral frameworks, and spiritual resources for significant numbers of Australians, while also subtly shaping the broader culture? The answer is neither simple nor uniform across the diverse tapestry of contemporary Australia, inviting ongoing scholarly and public reflection. Let me leave you with some challenging questions for deeper reflection. Was Protestantism genuinely the moral backbone of early Australia, providing the ethical foundations that enabled the construction of a functioning society in a harsh new land? Or was it primarily a reflection of British imperial power, a transplanted culture that might have looked vastly different had Australia been colonized by another nation? Can religious traditions maintain relevance and exert influence without possessing cultural dominance or privileged status? What constitutes healthy religious influence in a pluralistic democracy where no single faith holds sway? And how should history remember and evaluate the rise of Protestant Christianity in Australia, celebrating its contributions, acknowledging its limitations and harms, or embracing a more nuanced and complex understanding? The rise of Protestantism in Australia is fundamentally a story about faith, culture, and constant change across centuries. It shaped communities, influenced values, and built institutions that continue to matter today. However, the meaning of that history and how Australians relate to it continues to evolve. Understanding this rich and often complex religious history honestly is essential for comprehending modern Australia more completely. This is the Scholar's Ledger, where history, faith, and power are revealed. We invite you to subscribe, share your insights in the comments below, and join us in the ongoing search for truth.